Hey YouTube, Bravo back with another Gloomhaven terrain vid. This time we're looking at scenario 23, Deep Ruins. Now as usual, I plan on just walking you through the scenario build. I'll throw links to all of the STL files that I've used in addition to ones covered previously in the video description. And yeah, hopefully just give you a bit of an idea of what I've done and maybe give you some new ideas for stuff that you're building and printing yourself. So, starting with the first room here, as you can see, we've got the opening area of the scenario. And guys, as usual, I think it goes without saying, if you've clicked on this video about scenario 23, stands to reason you're probably going to see stuff to do with scenario 23, including the layout, enemies that you would encounter, and so forth. So the usual spoiler warning. If you don't want to know about any of that stuff, stop watching now. I can say I won't be including any details about the Angry Face class, which anyone who's watched my previous playthrough video for this level would know that I'm using at the moment. So yeah, you don't need to worry about Angry Face. He doesn't feature anywhere in this video. So that being said, this first room, I'm only obviously going to go through things that are new and in addition to previous print files used. So starting with the walls. I tried some new walls for this scenario, which I'm really happy with the way they turned out. These walls are called Delving Decor. Delving Decor Basic Ruin Walls by Dutch Mogul. Now Dutch Mogul has a stack of really good quality files on Thingiverse. If you're not familiar with the work, definitely check it out. I've got heaps of files from them and they're all very good quality. So these walls took a little bit of work to get them compatible with my build, just insofar as scaling. They didn't quite work for the hexes that I wanted them to span. So it was just a case of adjusting the widths and the lengths of some of the pieces. So the way the wall works, it's basically three main modular pieces that fit together, and you can fit them together in any order you want, and that makes up the wall essentially. And then on the ends, you either have end pieces or corner pieces that you can use. So the wall you're looking at there on the far side, that's three of those panels fit together. Two of those panels fit together with an end piece on one end being here and a corner piece being here. So obviously once you work out your scaling and what you want to do with them, they're very versatile. And if I just move the camera back, you'll see the same thing on this closer wall. A nice piece here with a big bit of damage and missing blocks through the middle for a bit of flavor. So yeah, definitely recommend checking out these walls. I intend on printing a lot more of them. I do still love the main workhorse of my builds, which is the RB Ross walls from Thingiverse. You'll see them feature prominently through the rest of this video in the other rooms and also in my previous builds. I've printed out a stack of them. I really like them. They're quick to print in relative terms for printing. They dry brush up really nicely. And yeah, I've got a couple of shoe boxes filled up with them. So I'll continue to use them, but it's nice to start branching off. I've had my printer since January, my Creality Ender, and I've had Gloomhaven since the same time. I got that at the start of the year. And yeah, since I've started playing Gloomhaven, I've come to really love the game. And obviously I love printing and painting my terrain. And I'm enough scenarios in now to the game where I have enough to pretty much lay out any scenario that I've come across so far. Now is a good time. I've got that sort of luxury of having it all there, so I can now start branching out a little bit and trying to find other alternative pieces that I can start introducing to the game just for a bit more variety and interest. So that's what I plan on doing with these walls. I'll start printing out some 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe up to 5 hex variants of them, and just have them there to use where walls of a block type are a bit more appropriate than the more rounded sort of stone block walls or rock walls that feature in the RB Ross designs. So in addition to the walls, I've also tried some new floors. So there's hexes you see there. These are by Robogon, and they're actually overlay tiles, which the way they print from Thingiverse, they're quite thin. They're wafer thin, and they're designed to obviously sit on top of your hexes, I believe. But I really like the look of them. They've got a lot of depth and detail to them and texture on top, which lends itself to dry brushing really well. So I just increased the Z height on them to match exactly the dimensions of my other hexes I've been using. And yeah, printed out a bunch of those, painted them up, and I really like the look of them. They're, again, something different that I can choose to use for different parts of my dungeons, or to differentiate between one room to the next. So definitely recommend checking them out. There's another type, there's various types on that Robogon design page. I believe there's 4. There's like man-made stone, natural stone, wood, and something else. I can't remember what this one's called, but that's one I've used. And in the next room, you'll see there's also another new type of hex that I've used. So yeah, check those out. What else? Probably should show you the actual entrance to this room, which is a larger print. It's quite good. It's called the Cavern Entrance by Ekaroth from Thingiverse. And I printed that out just because where I can, I like to try and have some sort of homage to the flavor text and theme it up as it was written by Isaac Childress. So I'll just pick the camera up here if I can. Okay, so as you can see there, that whole piece, that wall with the big pillar on the left and the smaller pillar on the right that's broken, that all prints as one piece, and that's the Cavern Entrance. So I painted that up and thought that would just be a nice introduction to the scenario that sort of fits in with the previous text from the end of Abandoned Sewers. So if that's something you're interested in, I'll include that link as well. From memory, I had to rescale that quite a bit, but that's not hard. You just basically adjust the percentage of the scale and suit it. I think what I did is I loaded up one hex onto the print bed in Cura, which is the slicer program that I use, and I kept making that, or kept resizing that Cavern Entrance until the span through the middle, that archway, was as wide as one hex. So that's an easy rule of thumb to follow. We also have a new door, which is this rusty looking metal. It's actually a sewer grill by Mojo Bob from Thingiverse again. And I actually got the idea for that from a friend and fellow Gloomhaven terrain designer, Lambo Amazeballs. I don't know if you've checked out his stuff on YouTube, but he does really fantastic 3D terrain builds, and he's actually putting together the abandoned sewer at the moment as well. And yeah, he gave me the idea for that door. So if you haven't checked out his videos, definitely have a look. He does some really great work. I don't think there's anything else in the first room which I haven't sort of already covered in a previous video. So I'll move on to the next. Actually, before I do, the water hexes. I have touched on those in a previous video, but I hope to be doing a tutorial for how I make those in the next few weeks. But basically, they're a Robogon Thingiverse file, the water hexes for Gloomhaven. If you search on that, you'll find them. And yeah, I just print those out, paint them up, glue down some various talus pieces onto the hexes, and then mix up some 2-part resin and tint it with various colors and pour that in, and it sets like that. They're quite easy, and I think they look quite good. They give a good effect for water. And yeah, obviously in this scenario there is no water. I just use them to, add a bit of extra flavor. I think they look quite nice in amongst the other hexes, so that's something I'll continue to do probably, particularly in this, sewer themed couple of scenarios that we're experiencing at the moment. Okay, so once we get through the first room, we have a left and a right corridor branching off into 2 rooms. So I tried to, again, stick with the scenario text, which mentions a number of runes across the walls in the latter stages of this scenario. So I've used a couple of different pieces. Firstly, we have the Runic Gateways, which is this and over here. Those pieces are by Dutch Mogul, and I rescaled them to be quite tall and grand looking in comparison to the miniatures. And yeah, just used green and Screamer pink paint to paint in the runes on those, just for a little, make it pop sort of against the grey. And I also printed out the Cyclopean Pillars, which are these, and again rescaled them. They're usually quite, they're not very tall, but I've actually rescaled them to have that sort of incrementally stepping up look from the smallest one at the fork, reaching right up to the same height as the archways at the back, which I quite like the effect that gave me, and just it's something a little bit different for that middle corridor section. We also have a couple of monster printouts, the Ancient Artillery by Robogon, which I've painted up to look all rusty. And we also have some earth elementals there, which are, again, a Thingiverse file by Schlossbauer. They print up really nicely. There's 2 different variants. I think there's a remix that I've used as well. One prints in 2 parts and they snap together very precisely and just glue together. And the other one was a 1-piece print, but both turned out really good on my Creality printer, so definitely recommend checking them out. We also, I don't think I mentioned it, but the skeletons in that first room, they're a Thingiverse file by Sylogy, is the name of the Thingiverse user. There's actually about 8 or 9 in the set, I believe, and they all are, I believe, quite good sculpts and poses. And the support removal is a bit of a pain, especially on miniatures like skeletons who have those finer bones. It's easy to snap things off, especially for me because I'm obviously fairly new to all this. But I find once you've printed off a few, you learn where the weak points are and you learn the tips and tricks to get the supports off. It becomes easier and easier essentially. And hey, at the end of the day, if you snap things off like I do, just a bit of super glue and glue it back on and it's no worries. Okay, so there's those new hex overlay tiles again that I've used. This is the other variant that I chose to go with. So yeah, I mean, they're quite flat on top. So there's not a lot of depth there to dry brush onto, but I think they still turned out pretty good. And just to give you a bit of a comparison while we're talking about hexes, so that's one of those new overlay types. Then you have this other type, which again is one of those overlays. And then you have the ones I've been using up until now. Now this is, I basically categorize these. These are the Nesta Deluxe Gloomhaven floor tiles. This is one of the good ones. And when I say good, I mean that it's quite clean looking on top. It's just got those cracks through it, which add a bit of, bit of flavor. But it's quite smooth looking, and there's no sort of unnatural artifacting that you can see on that. That's because I stopped the print at about, I don't know, 95% or something like that. And what that does is it stops the print and, preserves it like this. But if you let those prints run through to completion, at least on my printer anyway, and I believe there's been other comments to the same effect on Thingiverse from other users, if you let them print all the way, you get that weird sort of artifacting that you can see on top there, where the filament just sort of ends up in little bumps and swirls and things like that, which I must admit, on some it doesn't look too bad. It kind of looks like just dirt and grime build up and you can get away with it. But on others, I find it just looks a little bit jarring and it doesn't look as natural. So that's just a little thing to be aware of when you're choosing which ones to print out. If I was to start again and do it from the start, I would use the previous two that I've shown you from those overlay tiles from Robogon, just because they print cleanly, they paint up really well, and you don't have to worry about, having those weird little artifacts introduced on the print. Okay, so moving on to the final room. And let me just pop that back in there. I'll just move my light source as well. Alright, so not a lot to go through really in this final room that I haven't covered previously in other videos. The main things I wanted to point out is I printed out a new statue, which is the Gothic hooded statue from Thingiverse by Harrowtail. And that's this. It's a really nice, crisp sculpt, and it's one of the best minis I've had print out on my printer. It looks really dark there. I'll see if I can get some light on it. It's actually really nice, and I'm considering using it for the cultists, actually, for Gloomhaven, for the enemy types. So I'm going to print out a few more and see how they paint up. But this particular one is designed as a statue, and you can't really tell too well from this lighting, which I'm not going to muck around with too much. But I've printed it up to look like a brass statue, essentially, with that sort of green hazy film that brass statues get on them over time. So it's definitely worth checking out. And in addition to that, we have some pressure plates that you can see there on the Hexes. They're a Robogon file. So I printed a couple of those up because anyone who's played this scenario would know. There's some mechanics involving pressure plates in regards to the goal of the scenario. So I believe everything else has probably been covered. Perhaps not this wall here. That's just a random wall. I actually don't have the details of that handy, but it's one I found on Thingiverse, which I just thought I'd print as something different. And then you've got things like those little individual green glass bottles down the end there. I'm sitting on top of a crate, and the sword rack and barrels and gargoyles. All of those things I've included on my previous videos. So if you're interested in finding out more about those, feel free to check out my other vids. Or if there's anything that you like the look of that you haven't been able to find, just shoot me a question below and I'm happy to help you out with the file. So that's the scenario finished. Hopefully you're enjoying these videos. I obviously don't have many subscribers or huge viewer counts or anything, but I'm definitely enjoying the game of Gloomhaven. I'm really enjoying the terrain, and I'm actually really enjoying the video and audio side of recording these videos and uploading them. So hopefully you might be able to tell the difference from my initial video quality. I've invested in a new camera, nothing crazy expensive, but just a good decent HD webcam, and I've just grabbed myself a new mic as well for slightly better audio. So if you're along for the ride and enjoy checking out the terrain, I'm hoping that you are noticing slightly improved quality. And yeah, I think the plan from here is I'm just putting the finishing touches on the next scenario, which is Ancient Cistern, which hopefully we're going to be playing later this week. So I'll be recording that one again and uploading it once we've finished. And yeah, if you enjoy the videos, click like if you can. If you haven't subscribed yet and you're enjoying watching these vids, please consider subscribing. And yeah, I think to close, I'll just grab the camera and give you a bit of an overall look. At scenario 23. And yeah, happy gaming, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.